Welcome to latest news. Let's get to the current news. On November 15th, Russian Federation troops fired one of the most massive attacks on Ukraine since the beginning of the war. About 100 rockets of various types were fired, such as X-101, X-555, and X-22. They struck almost the entire territory of Ukraine. Objects of energy, transport and military infrastructure were hit. The previous close missile attack was just over a month ago. According to the information we have on the volume of production in Russia of new and modernization of old, Soviet-type missiles, it appears that the X-type missiles of different series are modernized at the rate of 19 to 22 missiles per week. Modern rockets are produced in 3 to 4 pieces of the main types per week. That makes a total of 9 to 12 of all types each week. So it takes the Russian Federation 4 to 5 weeks to accumulate rockets for such an intensity of attacks as November 15th. According to the military experts in the field, Russia cannot accelerate the production of rockets because there is not enough production capacity and component parts. The situation may change in the next few weeks due to the arrival of Iranian missiles in the Russian military. After all, Patrushev, one of those close to Putin, recently went to allied Iran and negotiated the supply of new missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles for cash. The information has not been officially confirmed, and moreover this is insider information. But it makes sense to trust this information and logically it adds up. News from eastern Ukraine. According to reports from Russian and Ukrainian officers, fighting continues around Svatovo and the settlements between Svatovo and Kremina. Russian sources say that on November 14th near Svatovo, Ukrainian armed forces launched 2 strikes with mechanized and infantry units. One was repelled, and the second seems to be still going on. Ukrainian sources say that one of the strikes had limited success and they are now trying to build on it. Russian staff officers again, as in late September, speak of the likely prospect of abandoning Kremina, Rubizhne and Severodonetsk and Lysychansk if the AFU can break through the Russian armed forces' defense south of Svatovo. There are no orders to that effect, and everyone is waiting for developments. Heavy fighting continues near Bakhmut. According to Russian officers, they have been ordered to take this city at any cost, because it is of key importance both for the defense and for a possible winter offensive by the RF armed forces. Avdiivka and Ugledar also remain targets of Russian attacks. Avdiivka is needed by the Russian armed forces to save themselves from the danger of a cutting strike by the AFU between Donetsk and Horlivka. Ugledar is needed as a future defense node and to remove the threat of an AFU strike on Volnovakha and to interrupt supplies between Donetsk and Mariupol. Near Ugledar, the Russian armed forces achieved local successes, occupying Pavlovka and several other settlements, but this cost the Russian military heavy losses and as of the evening of November 15th, the offensive in this direction halted. The Bakhmut, Ugledar, and Starobelsk directions remain the main sources of losses for the Russian armed forces and the AFU in November. Let us now turn to the news from the southern part of Ukraine. Despite the lack of official confirmation, there is information that the Kinburn spit up to the settlement of Jeruska is under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces. On November 14th, the Russian Federation military forces attempted a counterattack, which was repulsed. The Ukrainian infantrymen and their equipment are fortifying the bridgehead and preparing for offensive actions. We know from sources at Russian headquarters that as early as November 14th, the grouping on the left bank of the Dnieper River in the Kherson region continued to retreat toward Crimea and Melitopol. Artillery has been almost completely withdrawn, so the AFU is stockpiling equipment on the Kinburn Spit. Small units of airborne troops, Marines from Novorossiysk and motorized riflemen occupy settlements along the left bank of the Dnieper. It was with them that the AFU SDF units in Oleshki, Ola Pristan and Kakhovka exchanged fire in the evening of November 14th. The Russian military, according to sources at headquarters, retreated. There was no task to hold the ground. It was necessary to fix the movement and delay the enemy a little. The troops are retreating gradually, we put up roadblocks so as not to miss a surprise blow when retreating, comments a senior Russian officer located between Skadovsk and Genisky. On November 8 to 10, the Russian armed forces intensified the construction of fortifications north and northwest of Armyansk as well as around the road to Chongar and Genichesk. Work has begun to organize defenses 15 to 20 kilometers west of Melitopol and 20 kilometers northwest of Mariupol. The armed forces of the Russian Federation are also trying to cover Berdyansk with fortifications. Let's move on to international news. In his video address to G20 leaders at the Bali summit, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky outlined the conditions necessary to end the conflict. The peace process will be possible when Russia confirms Ukraine's territorial integrity, withdraws its troops from Ukrainian territory and pays compensation for the damage caused. Then international measures are needed to prevent a repeat of the conflict, and only after that is the signing of peace documents. Foreign Minister Lavrov responded to this statement and called these conditions unrealistic. The countries of the world need to abandon the policy of unilateral sanctions and not to use energy as a weapon, Xi Jinping said at the G20 summit. Ideological divisions and bloc confrontation only undermine global progress, he said. He called for lifting unilateral sanctions and lifting restrictions on scientific and technical cooperation. The G20 countries have agreed on a draft of the final communiqué of the summit in Bali. The document includes rejection of the era of wars, and most G20 countries also condemned Russia's war in Ukraine. Zelensky said that the grain deal could become open-ended. I believe that our grain export initiative deserves to be extended indefinitely, regardless of when the war ends. So to that end, I suggest extending the grain export initiative to our other ports, particularly the ports of Nikolaev and Olvia in the Nikolaev region, he said, speaking by video link to the G20 summit. China opposes Russia's exclusion from the G20 and other international platforms, Foreign Minister Wang Yi. Moscow's decision to give the Japanese company Sodeco a 30% stake in the new operator of the Sakhalin-1 project is crucial for Japan's energy security, said Hirokazu Matsuno, Secretary General of the government. According to Matsuno, such a step is important in terms of stable energy supplies to Japan in the medium and long term. Both Russia and Ukraine tortured prisoners of war, the UN Human Rights Office reported. The U.S. set out to weaken, divide and ultimately destroy Russia, said Patrushev, Secretary of the Russian Security Council. Mass blackouts in Moldova due to Russian rocket attacks on critical infrastructure in Ukraine, said Minister of Infrastructure and Regional Development Andrei Spinu. According to him, one of the power lines supplying electricity from Romania to Moldova was automatically shut down. 2 rockets fell in the territory of Poland's Lublin Voivodeship, 2 deaths are reported. The rockets were fired at the territory of Ukraine. Prime Minister Morawiecki convenes an emergency meeting of the Council of Ministers Committee on National Security and Defense. The Polish Air Force took to the airfighters from the Tomazow Lubelski airfield. That's all for now. Thank you for watching. See you soon.